Hey, all you cool cats and kittens. It's your favorite history teacher back at you again with another historical video. Today, we continue on our unit of the time period from the 1920s to the end of the Great Depression and the New Deal, and we're almost there. So let's let's get right into it. I don't need to bore you with introductions because this has been one long unit. For sure. All right. Culture in the 1930s, a little bit different, a little bit how do you describe it? Well, we talked about the culture in the 1920s and then the Harlem Renaissance. So, we're going to be talking about more culture today. Culture, culture, culture. And that was your warm up. Objectives, we're going to describe the entertainment provided by motion pictures and radio, and then identify some artists and writers of the New Deal era. Yes, we're still talking about the New Deal. Still back on it. Still back on it. That doesn't sound right. All right, more. So, although the 1930s were a difficult time for many Americans, it was a profitable and golden age for the motion picture and radio industries. By the late 1930s, approximately 65% of the population attended movies once a week. The nation boasted over 15,000 movie theaters, which was more than banks and double the amount of hotels. Seems like they got their priorities right. Sales of radios also greatly increased during the 1930s from over 13 million sold in 1930 to 28 million sold by 1940. And more than ever before, people across the country and around the world shared cultural experiences through radio and motion pictures, movies. So there's a picture of a 1930s movie theater and a 1930s radio. All right, movies are lit. Wacky comedies, lavish musicals, love stories, and gangster films all vied for the attention of the movie going public. Following the end of the silent films era and the rise of talking pictures, new stars such as Clark Gable, Marlene Dietrich, and James Cagney rose from Hollywood, the center of the film industry. These stars helped launch a new era of glamour and sophistication in Hollywood. Some films made during the 1930s, offered a pure escape from the hard realities of the Great Depression. By presenting visions of wealth, romance, and good times, the movies made people forget about their troubles. That's what we're all about. Perhaps the most famous film of the era, and one of the most popular of all time, is called Gone with the Wind, and it was produced in 1939. Another movie called Flying Down to Rio in 1933 was a light romantic comedy featuring Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers. Those two went on to make many films together, becoming America's favorite dance partners. Other notable movies of the era include The Wizard of Oz, 1939, and Snow White and the Seven Dwarves, 1937, which showcased the dazzling and innovative animation of Walt Disney. You have comedies like Monkey Business and Duck Soup, starring the zany Marx Brothers, became very popular during this time. So too did films that combine the escapist appeal with more realistic plots and settings. Americans flocked to see gangster films that presented images of the dark, gritty streets and looming skyscrapers of urban America. These movies featured hard-bitten characters struggling to succeed in a harsh environment where they faced the difficulties that Depression-era audiences could easily understand. Notable films for this genre include Little Caesar and Public Enemy, or The Public Enemy. Some commentators believe that several films, such as Mr. Deeds Goes to Town, and directed by Frank Capra, presented the social and political accomplishments of the New Deal in a positive light. These films portrayed honest, kind-hearted people winning out over those greedy special interests. In much of the same way, the New Deal seemed to represent the interests of average Americans. Aw. Um, I think test question. Um, the I can't speak. The third one and the fourth one. There's Clark Gable and Marlene Dietrich, James Cagney. Here's uh, Clark Gable again, Gone with the Wind. Here's Ginger Rogers and Fred Astaire in their movie to Rio, Flying Down to Rio. Wizard of Oz. Okay. Snow White. Monkey Business. Hey, look, Marilyn Monroe. Ginger Rogers again. Duck Soup, the Marx Brothers. So you got Groucho, Harpo, Chico, and I can't think of the other one. Oh, the other one eludes me. Little Caesar, The Public Enemy. Look, James Cagney again. Tune in. All right. So even more of the movies, radio embodied the democratic spirit of the times. Families typically spent several hours a day. Why did that sound weird? Several hours a day gathered together, listening to their favorite programs. It was no accident that FDR chose radio as the medium for his fireside chats. Radio, test question, was the most direct means of access to the American people. Like movies, radio programs offered a range of entertainment. In the evening, radio networks offered excellent dramas and a variety of programs. Orson Welles, actor, director, producer, writer, created one of the most renowned radio broadcasts of all time. October 30th, 1938, radio listeners heard news that Martians had invaded Earth. Panic set in as many Americans became convinced that the world was ending. This, of course, was not true. It was Wells' program radio drama on H.G. Wells' no relation novel, The War of the Worlds. The radio broadcast revealed the power of radio at a time when Americans received fast breaking news over the airwaves. And you thought they didn't. They had it quick. What about now? Later, Orson Welles would direct Citizen Kane and Touch of Evil. After making their reputation in radio, comedians like Bob Hope, Jack Benny, and the duo of Burns and Allen moved on to work in television and movies. You have soap operas. This should have been a test question, but it's not. Soap operas were named soap operas because soap companies usually sponsored them. That's some trivial knowledge you need to know. And they tended to play in the late morning to early afternoon for homemakers. Children programs such as The Lone Ranger generally aired later in the afternoon when children were home from school. One of the first worldwide radio broadcasts described for listeners was the horrific crash of the Hindenburg, a German Zeppelin, or if you want to think of a blimp, think of a early blimp, rigid airship. New Jersey, May 6, 1937. Such immediate coverage became a staple in American society. So here you have a family listening to the radio. Obviously, this is stage posing. But here you have Orson Welles, Citizen Kane, Touch of Evil. Bob Hope, Jack Benny, and Burns and, what are their names? Burns and Reed. Burns and Allen. Here's a soap opera. And here are the characters. Imagine having to read your script right next to your people doing it live on the radio. Yes, this is on the radio, not TV. Here's the Hindenburg crash. All right. FAP. In contrast to many radio and movie productions in the 1930s, much of the art, music, and literature of the time was sober and serious. Despite the grim artistic tones, much of the artistic work conveyed a more uplifting message. It often emphasized the strength of a character and the democratic values of the American people. America. A number of artists and writers embraced the spirit of social and political change the New Deal fostered. In fact, many received direct support through New Deal work programs. The government officials who headed these programs believed that art played an important role in national affairs. The Federal Art Project, FAP, a branch of the WPA, paid artists a living wage to produce art. Test question. It also aimed to increase public appreciation of art and to promote a positive images of American society. Project artists created posters, taught art in the schools, painted murals on the side of walls on public buildings. These murals inspired the revolutionary work of Mexican muralists like Diego Rivera, typically portrayed the dignity of ordinary Americans at work. During the New Deal era, a number of American painters produced outstanding works of art. Edward Hopper, Thomas Hart Benton, Jackson Pollock, heard his name before, and Grant Wood. The WPA's Federal Theater Project hired actors to perform plays. This project also hired artists to provide stage sets and props for theater productions that played across the country. It subsidized the work of important American playwrights like Clifford Odets' Waiting for Lefty, the dramatization of the labor struggles in the 30s. So, lots of pictures. If you hadn't noticed, here's the FAP. Action makes dreams come true. Yeah, I forgot all these names that I just said, but here are their paintings from this time period. This is Jackson Pollock, very famous man. It's crazy to think that some of his work can be sold for probably millions and millions of dollars. If you've ever seen this photo before, it's called American Gothic, and it was produced by that I think his name is Grant Wood. And here's some more. Here's the Federal Theater Project, FTP. And here's Waiting for Lefty. All right, American folk music. Gotta have nothing like culture, nothing like music. Experiencing firsthand the tragedies of the Depression, singer and songwriter Woody Guthrie used music to capture the hardships of America. Along with tens of thousands of people from the Great Plains region, Guthrie was forced by the Dust Bowl to seek a better life elsewhere. He took to the road west in search of brighter opportunities and wrote about his experiences in his songs. These Dust Bowl ballads told of the devastation brought by the dust storms. These ballads also revealed the trials of the journey west and the challenges that migrant farmers face. A likable and easygoing performer, Guthrie had his own radio show, first in LA, later in NYC. While traveling, Guthrie often wrote at a pace of a song a day. The hundreds of simple but honest songs Guthrie wrote about hard times and hope will become very popular around the country. And if you've ever heard, "This land is your land, this land is my land, from California, da 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 da," that's him. That's this guy, Woody Guthrie. And now becoming a classic American folk song. There's Woody Guthrie. There's probably his vinyl record. All right, writers write. So many writers received support through yet another WPA program, the Federal Writers Project. You have the Federal Theater Project, the Federal Art Project. It only makes sense, the Federal Writers Project. Future Pulitzer and Nobel Prize winner Sal Bellow was given his first writing job through this program. The Federal Writers Project also helped Richard Wright, African American author, complete his acclaimed novel about a young man trying to survive in a racist world called Native Son. Zora Neale Hurston. If you guys remember the last two names, those people came to prominence during the Harlem Renaissance. Wrote a stirring novel with the FWP assistants. Their eyes were watching God in 1937 about a young woman growing up in rural Florida. John Steinbeck, test question. One of the country's that should be one, not on. One of this country's most famous authors received assistance from the FWP as he was able to publish his epic novel, The Grapes of Wrath, 1939. This novel reveals the lives of Oklahomans who left the Dust Bowl and ended up in California where their hardships continued. Before his success, Steinbeck had also endured the difficulties of the Depression like most other writers. Other books and authors examine the difficulties of life during the 1930s. You have James T. Farrell's Stud Lonergan trilogy, 1932-1935, provided a bleak picture of working class life in an Irish neighborhood in Chicago. Jack Conroy's novel, The Disinherited, portrayed the violence and poverty of the Missouri coal fields where Conroy's own father and brother died in a mine disaster. Oops. Another best-selling novel of the time was Marjorie Kinnan Rawlings' The Yearling, which depicted the tough life of a family living in rural Florida. Rural Florida gets a good rap. Other writers also found hope in the positive values of American culture. Writer James Agee, and photographer Walker Evans collaborated on a book about an Alabama sharecroppers called Let Us Now Praise Famous Men, 1941. Thornton Wilder's play Our Town captured the beauty of a small town life in New England. Although artists and writers recognized America's flaws, they contributed positively to the New Deal legacy. And these intellectuals praised the virtues of American life and took pride in their country's traditions and accomplishments. So, shout out to you guys. Here's more FWP posters. Here's Sal Bello, Herzog, Richard Wright. You've seen him before, Native Son. Zora Neale Hurston in her book, Grapes of Wrath, John Steinbeck. This is the Studs Lonergan trilogy that I just talked about. That's Jack Conroy and Marjorie Kinnan Rawlings and James Agee and Walker Evans. James Agee's right here. Walker Evans is on the right. They kind of look related. And Thornton Wilder's Our Town. And Our Town, we're done. You're done. All right. That concludes this video. I know there's only 6 slides and probably 30 slides of just straight up pictures. So maybe you guys enjoyed that. Hopefully you did. And I have the book right in front of me right here. So, yeah, we're done. We're almost done. We got one more lesson to talk about. So that just means the test is coming soon. All right. Your homework is page 471, 4 through 6. Page 471, 4 through 6. So hopefully you guys did enjoy that. If you did, make sure you hit that like button, leave a comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.